Hello everyone and welcome back once again. This is your history teacher here, and this time I am here with a new chapter of NCERT Grade 6 History, that is new questions and ideas. Students, if you remember, in your chapter number 5 we learn and discuss about Mahajanpadas, that how these Mahajanpadas grew more powerful. Students, as the cities like the Magda or the Vajji Confederacy were developing, so as a result, the life was changing in the villages. So, that time, many thinkers like the Gautam Buddha and the Mahavira were trying to understand these changes that occurred in the society that time. So, such kind of thinkers wanted to try and find out the true meaning of life. And students, do you know, during this period, Buddha and Mahavira also attained enlightenment and spread their knowledge and learning about the real meaning of life to common people. So students, in this chapter, we will learn and discuss the classical system of thought and the context in which they developed and flourished during this period. So, let's start. Now students, let's learn and discuss about the story of Buddha. Students, Siddhartha Gautama, who was the founder of the Buddhism, was born about approximately 2500 years ago. And as I said, he was also known as Gautam Buddha. Students, Gautam Buddha belonged to a small Gana known as the Sakya Gana, and he was a Kshatriya by birth. Students, Gautam Buddha was a young man when he left his home and wandered here and there in search of true knowledge by meditating and meeting famous thinkers. Students, Gautam Buddha meditated for days on under a peepal tree at Bodh Gaya in Bihar, where he attained enlightenment. And students, once he attained enlightenment, then he was known as the Buddha, means to say the wise one or the wisest person. Then, after attaining the enlightenment, the Gautam Buddha went to Sarnath, which is near Varanasi, where he taught for the first time. And students, then he spent the rest of his life by traveling on foot, going from place to place, teaching people, till he passed away at Kushinara. Now students, let's learn about the teachings of the Buddhas. Students, Gautam Buddha taught that the life is full of suffering and unhappiness, and this is just because of our never-ending desires. Students, even if we get what we want, then we are not satisfied and want even more. And that's why Gautam Buddha describes our desires as our suffering. Students, Gautam Buddha also taught the people that life is full of suffering, which is caused by our cravings or never-ending desires. And students, Gautam Buddha described these desires as thirst or tanha. Students, he also taught that in order to overcome this constant cravings, we should follow moderation in everything. And he also taught people to be kind and to respect the life of others, including animals too. And students, Gautam Buddha believed that the results of our action means to say the karma, that what we do, whether good or bad, affects us both in this life and the next. Means to say in our next birth. Means that whatever we get in our present life or whatever we will get in our next birth is the result of our actions that we have done. Now students, let's understand that what are Upanishads. Students, literally the word Upanishad means approaching and sitting near. And students, the text contained in the Upanishads were basically the conversations between teachers and the students. Students, during this period, means to say, at the time of the Buddha, many other thinkers also emerged. And they started thinking about the kings beyond the earth or the known world. And they also developed the concept of Atman, or we can say the human soul, which is connected to the Brahmand, or we can say the universal soul. And students, the Upanishadic thinkers that we talk about mainly were men, especially Brahmins and the Rajas. And in fact, there is an exception of women thinkers, such as Gargi, who was famous for her learning and participated in debates that were held in royal courts that time. And in fact, many of the ideas of the Upanishads were later developed by the famous thinker Shankaracharya. Students, you will amazed to know that during this period, the poor people were rarely allowed to study the Upanishads, but there were the exception of Satyakama Jabala, named after his mother Jabali, who was a slave. Means to say, this person, Satyakama Jabala, despite being poor, studied the Upanishads, and later he was accepted as a disciple by a Brahmin named Gautama, and then he became a very famous thinker and writer. Now students, let's learn about the Jainism. Students, the most famous of the Jaina thinker was Vardhaman Mahavira. He was the last and the 24th Tirthankara of the Jainas. Students, Vardhamana Mahavira was a Lichavi prince born in Vaishali in the Vajji Sangha. And at the age of 30, he left his home in the search of enlightenment. For about 12 years, he led a hard and lonely life. And then, after 12 years, he attained the enlightenment. Students, during his 12 years, Mahavira practiced very strict rules of ahimsa and said that all beings, plants and animals have the rights to live. And students, in fact, he also taught to each man and woman who want or who wish to know the truth must leave their homes. And the one who wish to know the truth must follow the strict rules of ahimsa. That means not hurting or killing living beings. Students, the followers of Vardhamana Mahavira were known as Jainas. And students, all the followers of Mahavira had to lead very simple lives. And all the followers had to be absolutely honest and were especially asked not to steal. And students, in fact, the followers mustn't only be honest. In fact, they also observe celibacy. Means to say, the state of being single or unmarried. And students, nextly, the followers of the Mahavira had to give up everything, including their clothes too. Students, following these rules was very difficult. But students, that time, many people left their homes in order to follow this new religion, while many others supported the Jain monks and nuns by giving them food and clothes. And slowly and gradually, as the time passes, the Jainism spread throughout the country. At first, the teachings of the Mahavira was transmitted orally, but later the teachings were written down much later in Vallabhi, Gujarat in 500 AD. Now students, the next topic of this chapter is the Sangha. Students, Sangha was basically an association of those people who left their homes. And students, as I already said earlier that both the Mahavira and Buddha believe that only those who left their homes could attain true knowledge. And so, Mahavira and Buddha form these kind of sanghas or groups for those people who left their homes. And students, the rules for the Buddhist Sangha were written in a book called Vinay Pitaka. And students, in these Sanghas, all men could join, but the children who wanted to join these Sanghas had to take permissions from their parents. And students, along with the common peoples, the slaves also had to be permitted by their owners and the women by their husbands. And even the debtors had to take permissions from their creditors and the royal workers from their kings. And students, all the men and women who joined the Sangha led simple lives, and they had to meditate it for most of the time, and even went to cities and villages to beg for food during their fixed hour. And that is why they were also known as bhikshus. That is derived from a Prakrit word bhikshus, which means beggar. And the women were known as bhikshunis. And students, these sanghas were open to each and every part of the society. Means to say, people from all part of society, including Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, joined those sanghas. And many also wrote down the teachings of the Buddhas, while others composed beautiful poems. Yes. Now, students, let's move on towards the last topic of this chapter, that is monasteries. Students, all Buddhist and Jain monks went from place to place spreading their knowledge. But during the rainy season, they stayed in one place for a few months. And students, do you know why? Because during the rainy season, it was very difficult to travel. So students, their supporters built temporary shelters for them in gardens, or they lived in natural caves in hilly areas. Whereas the other supporters also built the permanent shelters for them that were known as viharas. And the earliest viharas were generally made of wood, but slowly and gradually as the time passes, the viharas were made of brick by a rich landlord or a king. And students, over the centuries, as the time passes, Buddhism spread to many parts of the subcontinent and in many parts of the world. Now, students, that's all about your chapter number 6. And with this topic here, your chapter number 6 is completed. Now, I will be come back soon with another chapter. Till then, stay home, stay safe, and stay healthy.